My name's Calvin Waite, and I trade Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for a living. I got introduced into Bitcoin back in 2012. It was the end of 2012, and I don't know if anybody knows what what the price of Bitcoin is today. Anybody?
About 10,600.
Yep, about 10,600. So back in 2012, my friend comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you're a kind of a Bitcoin, or you're kind of a finance nerd. You do trading. You do all of this. You might be interested in this thing called Bitcoin." He said, "I've been mining it with my computer, and I've been selling them for $5 each, and I've made $400." He says, and I was just like, "What on earth are you talking about?" And and he said, "Well, they're currently trading for like $12.50. So I'm gonna, that's kind of where they're at." And I was like, "Well, what's the deal with these?" And he explained them to me. I was so shocked and so sold on the concept and the idea that I went and bought. Um, I paid him $150 and bought 10 Bitcoin on the spot. So I bought them from him for a premium. But looking back, $15 for a Bitcoin. Now here we are 8 years later, and they're worth $10,000. Like, that was a pretty sweet entrance, right?
Awesome.
So that's kind of how I got introduced to Bitcoin, and then uh, me and uh, me and that same guy, we we'd been friends for quite a while, and an opportunity came along where there was an exchange that went bankrupt. What happened was, in the early days of Bitcoin, there was a lot more black market and a lot more kind of devious activity involved in Bitcoin, and it was kind of the Wild West. And there was an exchange that the CEO essentially stole all the users' money and went to China and hid out there, and he's probably waiting for the time when maybe 10 years or whatever, when it's too late to prosecute because there's too much time that's gone by or something. But anyway, he stole everybody's money, and the courts in the state of Florida got involved, and we went ahead, and I contacted the lawyers there that was over the disbursement of all of those coins, and they tried to liquidate everything to cash as best they could, but they still had a whole bunch of wallets that were still available that they couldn't. They were illiquid coins, and we went and bought all of them, and we bought them for a decent amount, but nothing compared to what we discovered they were worth later on. And so eventually we decided that we would start a company, and we started Coinbook. And Coinbook became an exchange. We tried to create an exchange of our own and do things in a little bit more honest way or whatever. But my partner, actually, he got diagnosed with cancer, and in 6 months had passed away, and things went really south. It was really really hard, and the market went down, and things. So we lost a lot of money. But I'm kind of a financial geek, and going through school and being conservative with types of the way I kind of run my life and my business. There was kind of a limit where I wasn't willing to lose anymore. And so when it got down to that limit, I pulled the plug, and I managed to keep track of everything, and I paid back all of the users. I think I was the only exchange that ever kind of walked away from the business without anybody taking any losses, which was remarkable in the Bitcoin world. So from there, I did a lot of trade research, and now I've created 115 different trade bots that trade 115 different coins, and that's essentially how I make a living right now. So I'm just chilling and trading and having a good old time. So
Crazy. That's a really wild story. So I remember a couple years ago we went out. We were working on a class together at the University of Utah, and we went out to breakfast with somebody from the U. And Calvin was like, "I'm quitting my job." He's like, I made enough money in the crypto markets that I'm. It was you were working at the University of Utah, if I recall,
I
or
worked.
University Healthcare.
Yeah, it was a. I worked for the U of U for as a financial analyst. Then I worked for another company as a financial analyst, and then
Okay.
after a while, I was like, I don't know why I'm sitting here in a desk all day long because all I do is look at
Well,
Bitcoin anyway.
yeah, that's wild.
So in case you're all
So yeah,
wondering, I'm not filthy rich. I lost a ton of money on this business, so don't start looking at me like I'm anything special, you know. But I do
well,
know a
you're
lot.
definitely maybe you don't have the net worth that you had at one point during the big rally, right, of the altcoins and Bitcoin. Um, but you've learned a ton during that period of time. So what have you learned? Like, I'm thinking from behavioral finance perspective. You mentioned you had a stop loss, right? You had a level that you weren't willing to go beyond. But were you surprised by your emotional response or kind of your behavioral response to the volatility?
So I so being in Bitcoin and being involved in crypto, it exposes you to a giant amount of emotional volatility. So I wasn't nervous about that. I could just see that the so to give you guys some context, when I bought in at $15, the price rose from $15 up to $1,000, and people were going nuts. And then Bitcoin crashed all the way down to 175, and everyone also went nuts, and they like went through this giant phase of like, oh, this is it, it's over, like it's dead. And then it went slowly back up to 500, then 1,000, then it hit 2,500, then 5,000, then all the way up to 10,000, and people were like, this is crazy. And less than 2 weeks later, we went from 10,000 to 20,000, and then finally we rocketed back down to 10,000, and then it's been a year and a half, and then we hit a bottom of like 3,500. So 1 year of trading crypto is the same as being in normal markets for a decade. The amount of emotion and volatility is so intense that you have to have a certain personality to handle it. And I have like a huge risk tolerance, but I'm super patient. I can sit on an upside down trade forever until I find the right exit. And it's made me a pretty dang good trader. And that's why I've been able to keep just chilling and trading and living off of what I'm doing. So, but as far as the company, I knew what our liabilities were. I knew what I owed my customers, and I had no intention of claiming bankruptcy and letting everybody just crash and burn. I would rather come out of pocket and pay them back and make sure everyone was made whole, and me take the loss. And so I knew exactly where that limit was, where I wanted to keep a little bit of nest egg, and I also wanted to make sure my customers were fine. And I could also see that the way the business was structured, it wasn't as profitable as I thought. And we had a bank that was charging like over $20,000 a month, and so our expenses were so high. I could just tell that there was no runway for us to overcome that without serious investment. And I did my attempt at that and couldn't get any investment. So I was like, well, I'm not just going to sit and bleed out. So that's when I pulled the plug. So it was actually very logical and thought through, but it was it definitely was rough. It was probably the most stressful moment of my life. I like got shingles and everything else. I was like so stressed
Oh, wow.
out. But oh man, so my life right now is super awesome. Like I enjoy trading, and I enjoy sitting around and learning and reading news and keeping up on everything. So